Ferrari just built the fastest car in Bahrain, and it almost broke in the process. Charles Leclerc topped the timing sheets. Lewis Hamilton called the straight-line power drop like a junior engine. And on day 3, the car shut itself down. This is not drama. This is real telemetry. The SF-26 was reaching maximum speed 200 meters earlier than its rivals, then losing electrical deployment before the braking zone. Explosive acceleration. Sudden fade. A rocket on corner exit. A question mark at the end of the straight. And while headlines focused on Leclerc's fastest lap, almost no one showed you the thermal shutdown that stopped Hamilton on track, or the emergency cooling bodywork Ferrari had to install, or the internal tension between qualifying speed and race stability. On the surface, Ferrari looks like a title contender. Underneath, the data tells a far more fragile story. Stay with me, because what really happened inside the SF-26 during those 3 days could decide whether this is a championship car, or a glass cannon waiting to crack. Subscribe now, because this story is bigger than one fast lap. Day 1 looked clean on television. Ferrari rolled out with confidence. New red livery. New era. Hamilton in scarlet for the first time in official testing. But inside the data, something strange was already happening. The SF-26 had one of the strongest launches out of slow corners. The hybrid torque delivery was immediate. No hesitation. No delay. For the first 100 meters, it looked unbeatable. And that is exactly where the illusion begins. Because the car was deploying energy aggressively at corner exit. Almost too aggressively. On the telemetry traces, you could see the spike. Full deployment. Rapid acceleration. Then, a plateau. 200 meters before the braking zone, the acceleration curve flattened. The electrical boost was gone. Not gradually. Suddenly. That is clipping. And clipping is not just a technical inconvenience. It is a vulnerability. Imagine leading into turn 1. Battery depleted. The car behind still deploying full electric power. The closing speed becomes uncomfortable. Lewis Hamilton felt that imbalance immediately. He reported that the car surged early, but did not carry the same sustained push at the end of the straight. Now combine that with what he said about rear instability in fast corners. The aggressive diffuser concept was incredibly sensitive to ride height changes. When the car compressed at high speed, airflow could stall underneath. When that happens, rear downforce drops. And when rear downforce drops at over 300 km per hour, confidence disappears. Leclerc adapted quickly. He thrives with a sharp front end and a rear that moves slightly. He can live on that edge for 1 lap. That is why his times were impressive early. But Hamilton's driving style is different. He builds pace over stints. He protects the rear tires. He needs predictability. And the SF-26, in its current form, is not predictable. It is brilliant for a short burst, but nervous when pushed repeatedly. That is the contrast nobody showed you. While one side of the garage celebrated peak lap time potential, the other side was already asking deeper questions. How sustainable is this deployment strategy? How stable is this diffuser concept in traffic? And what happens when track temperatures rise? Because Bahrain in testing conditions is one thing. Race conditions are another. And that tension was building quietly long before the thermal shutdown on day 3. The data was already whispering a warning. Explosive speed. Delicate balance. And a system running closer to the limit than Ferrari may have wanted to admit. Day 2 is where the illusion reached its peak. Because if you only looked at the timing screen, Ferrari looked unstoppable. Charles Leclerc delivered a lap that shook the paddock. Fastest of the entire session. Confident. Precise. Aggressive on entry. The new front suspension geometry allowed him to brake incredibly late without the nose diving. The car stayed flat. That anti-dive design gave him stability under heavy braking and immediate rotation at turn-in. For a driver like Leclerc, that is perfection. He can attack curbs. He can commit early. He can live with a rear that moves slightly. And over 1 lap, the SF-26 looked like the fastest car on the grid. But what no one showed you was happening in the long runs. While Leclerc was extracting peak performance, Hamilton was running extended stints. And his feedback was far less comfortable. He reported that the electrical torque delivery was too abrupt mid-corner exit. Not smooth. Snappy. That sudden surge overloaded the rear tires. In Bahrain heat, rear tire temperature builds fast. Once it crosses the optimal window, grip drops sharply. And when grip drops, degradation accelerates. So while Ferrari had incredible traction in the first laps of a stint, the data suggested performance fall off later. This is where the conflict inside the car becomes clear. To win qualifying, you deploy aggressively. To survive the race, you must manage deployment carefully. Right now, the SF-26 is optimized for the first scenario, not the second. Hamilton's famous comment comparing the late straight feeling to a junior engine was not about raw horsepower. It was about energy timing. The car felt incredible early in the straight. Then it felt empty near the end. That is psychologically destabilizing for a driver. You cannot fully commit to defending or attacking if you do not know whether the boost will still be there. And this leads to something deeper. Trust. A driver builds rhythm when behavior is predictable. If power delivery changes lap to lap depending on battery state, confidence erodes. Now imagine adapting to a new team, new engineers, new communication systems, and a car that behaves differently in short runs versus long runs. That is the situation Hamilton is navigating. Meanwhile, Leclerc appears more naturally aligned with the car's aggressive front end and sharp rotation. But here is the hidden risk. If Ferrari develops the car toward more rear stability to suit Hamilton in races, they might lose that qualifying edge. If they continue pushing for qualifying dominance, they risk tire degradation and clipping in traffic. This is not just setup tuning. This is philosophical direction. And during day 2, while headlines celebrated raw pace, the engineers were already comparing degradation curves, comparing battery deployment maps, looking at thermal buildup across extended runs. Because deep inside the data, the SF-26 was showing two personalities: a qualifying monster, and a race car still searching for balance. And the tension between those two identities would explode on day 3. Day 3 is where everything stopped being theoretical. Because up until that point, Ferrari could still tell themselves a comforting story. Yes, the car is aggressive. Yes, the energy deployment needs refinement. Yes, the rear is sensitive. But the speed is real. Then the heat rose. Track temperature climbed above 30 degrees Celsius. Longer runs began. And Lewis Hamilton was pushing through a race simulation phase when it happened. The car shut down. Not a minor warning. A full thermal protection trigger from the hybrid system. The MGU-K overheated under sustained load. And when the system hits that thermal ceiling, it does not negotiate. It cuts. Silence on the straight. That moment changed the entire tone inside the garage. Because this was no longer about clipping strategy. It was about survival. Ferrari had pushed the packaging philosophy to the limit. Ultra-compact side pods. Tight internal cooling channels. Minimal external openings to protect aerodynamic efficiency. It looked beautiful. But beauty does not cool electronics. Under 50% sustained deployment in Bahrain conditions, the internal temperatures exceeded safe thresholds. That is the key detail. Not maximum deployment. Half. Which means there is almost no margin left when the car runs in dirty air on race day. And here is what no one emphasized strongly enough. The shutdown gave Ferrari crucial data. It confirmed that in its current configuration, the power unit cannot run at full thermal load for an entire Grand Prix distance in hot conditions. That is not speculation. That is measurement. So Ferrari responded immediately. Emergency engine cover with large cooling louvres. Visible, aggressive openings. Function over form. And yes, temperatures stabilized. But drag increased. Top speed potential dropped slightly. Which forces another compromise. Do you protect reliability and sacrifice straight-line efficiency? Or do you chase peak performance and risk another shutdown? Now step back and look at the entire 3-day picture. 385 laps completed. Solid mileage. But not dominant. And several of those laps were not representative of full attack conditions. The SF-26 has extraordinary mechanical traction. Possibly the best launch out of slow corners on the grid. It has peak aerodynamic load when the diffuser operates inside its narrow window. And it has drivers capable of extracting different qualities from it. But it also has a razor-thin operating margin. A narrow thermal window. A sensitive aerodynamic platform. An energy deployment that must be recalibrated to avoid early clipping without sacrificing exit acceleration. This is what nobody showed you clearly. Ferrari did not leave Bahrain confused. They left Bahrain with clarity. They know the car is fast enough to take pole. They also know it can overheat, degrade tires, and lose deployment at the worst possible moment. The SF-26 is not flawed in concept. It is extreme in execution. And extreme concepts demand precision. Hamilton now faces a unique challenge. He is not adapting to a slow car. He is adapting to a car that operates on the edge of its limits every lap. Leclerc may extract magic over one lap. But championships are won on Sunday. And Sunday requires thermal stability, energy consistency, tire management. If Ferrari solves the cooling without opening too much drag, if they smooth the torque delivery through software updates, if they widen the aerodynamic window slightly, This could be the fastest machine of the new era. But if those fixes cost them balance or straight-line efficiency, they may find themselves with a car that dazzles on Saturday and struggles when it matters most. Bahrain did not expose a weak Ferrari. It exposed a Ferrari operating at the absolute edge of engineering tolerance. And in Formula One, living at the edge can either create legends or break seasons before they truly begin. Now we need to talk about something even deeper. Because the most important story from Bahrain is not just thermal limits. It is direction. Ferrari left the test with a decision to make. Do they protect Leclerc's qualifying weapon? Or reshape the car to unlock Hamilton's race consistency? That choice will define the early phase of the season. Leclerc's feedback is clear. He feels comfortable when the front end bites aggressively, when the car rotates sharply on entry, when the rear moves just enough to help him point the nose. That setup, combined with the anti-dive suspension geometry, gives him immense confidence on a single lap. And in Bahrain, that confidence translated into raw pace. But Hamilton is asking for something different. He wants a rear that stays planted over long stints. He wants torque delivery that builds progressively, not violently. He wants predictability when tire temperatures rise. Those are not cosmetic differences. Those are opposite development paths. If Ferrari adds rear stability, they may dull that razor-sharp front. If they keep the car aggressive, they risk overheating the rear tires again in race conditions. And here is the uncomfortable truth. The 2026 regulations amplify small imbalances. Energy deployment windows are critical. If you cannot deploy consistently for an entire straight, you become vulnerable. If you deploy too aggressively early, you clip. If you conserve too much, you sacrifice lap time. That balancing act becomes even harder in traffic. Dirty air increases temperatures. Cooling efficiency drops. Battery stress rises. Now imagine the SF-26 sitting behind another car for 10 laps. Radiators working harder. Rear tires overheating faster. Diffuser sensitivity exposed by turbulent airflow. This is where Ferrari's real challenge begins. Because qualifying pace is visible. Race management is not. And championships are not won by pole positions alone. They are won by surviving the uncomfortable phases of a Grand Prix. There is also another factor quietly circulating in the paddock. Rumors of regulatory scrutiny. The FIA is monitoring active aero systems closely. There are whispers about front-wing flexibility at high speed. If a technical directive appears before the first race, even a small adjustment could alter balance significantly. And when your aerodynamic platform already operates within a narrow window, small changes have large consequences. Fred Vasseur understands this. Publicly calm. Privately calculating. He knows Ferrari has built something special. But he also knows that special machines demand discipline. The engine shutdown on day 3 was not just a problem. It was a warning.